All right, you've made it all the way to video 12. Congratulations. We are going to put together some of the concepts that we have done into a dashboard. So making your information presentable, sort of at a summary level for high-level business users to be able to quickly glean some information and have some flexibility to interact with it. So we're going to show how to do that here in Excel, and we're going to start just by talking about the concept of laying out a dashboard. It's a good idea to go ahead and take some time to organize your thoughts about what belongs on your dashboard, what metrics you're going to present, and do some real basic blocking of where you're going to put that content. I'll jump you over to the dashboard tab to show you what that looks like for me. I have a couple of visuals I've already gotten started, but for me, I just started by blocking off groups of cells and putting in there a placeholder for what information I was going to bring forward in order to present high-level sort of summary information and then a little more detail. I've already got some other stuff started, but this is all I do to get going is review what metrics I want here on the dashboard and make out some basic blocks of where I'm going to place that information. So let's head back over to the layout concept. That's what I would ask you to do. You know, you can have this dashboard or this Excel workbook, you can download it, and you can see how I went ahead and blocked it out. You could also come over here to this raw data and see what I've produced, given you for data to think about how you would like to share this. So you have information that is for every month over a couple year period by department. What is the number of admissions, the readmission rate, the average length of stay, and total cost of care. And so that is what's available to you in the data. You can see where my mind went in presenting this summary information. That may be instructive to you, but it'd be a good exercise to start with a blank canvas and plan out for yourself. What will I place where? How will I make this look? That's the process I go through as I go ahead and do this. Next, we'll do some connection of slicers and timelines, but not till we get a little more information in the dashboard. And then we'll talk about protecting your output. Now, Excel is great because you can manipulate so much, but it's also a risk that people can manipulate so much in your Excel file, especially when you're trying to present something in a dashboard. All right, so what do I have here for you to work with? We've got a dashboard tab already, and feel free to make your own or to delete this one, but it's a starting point. Then you got next to that the raw data that's going to help you get to these metrics. Now, this is kind of teed up for you where we've got summary information by month by metric. Now, not all data is going to look like this, of course, but I do recommend it as a best case scenario for presenting data is that you summarize your data beforehand into the metrics and time periods that you're trying to share information about. And so that work may have to be something you do in a separate workbook, in a separate couple of worksheets in order to get to this nice clean version where you can say for each month by department, what are those key facts and figures that you want to share. Then we are going to use that to build out all this different information. I also am going to have a tab where I keep some of the summary information that we'll bring over to the dashboard, just so it's got a separate place to live. And I also am going to have a tab for each one of the visuals that I create so that they stay separated. They will be pivot charts so that I can use slicers on them, and I want them to stay on their own in their own kind of area. It also allows me, I can hide these. I can come back and adjust just a particular visual without being worried about screwing up something else on the worksheet. So that's the format that I'm going to move forward here in building, and I'm going to show you how I've done this. So we've got the 4 top line metrics, and I usually like to present some sort of high-level summary information. It's great to be able to give people that little piece of information that they can leave the experience with that sticks in their head, like, oh my gosh, we had 35,000 admissions. Those high points in understanding their environment. So this is a hospital environment where we're looking at the total number of patients coming in, whether or not they got readmitted, which is a quality sort of indicator of our care. What was our length of stay? the average length of stay of those patients with us, and what was the cost. So we're going to go ahead and build out a generic high-level summary, just like the one you see for admissions over here in all the rest of the areas. And so this admissions one is a pivot chart, and I'm going to show you how I will build that for the other topics. Then this high-level summary item here is actually just a shape with no fill, and I am pointing to the summary informations tab and cell A3. So that is what we got going on. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like to build. The one last thing I'll just go ahead and add is let's insert a text box and get admissions placed up here as the headline for this item. No fill, all right. It's going to get a little finicky in some of the small formatting choices I have to make here, so just stick with me. I'm going to get this over to the middle. We're going to center it. We're going to make sure that that text is white so you can see it. Something happened in the meantime on accident to my summary figure. There we go. Now I don't like the outline that's around this, so I'm going to go to shape format, go to the shape outline, and make sure that there's no outline. Now we've got a nice clean title that sits atop that summary item. So we're going to do something similar for readmissions. Front to back, you can see the whole process. So let's start by getting at that graph. We're going to create a new tab, put it at the end, and we will name it after the item that we're going to be creating here, which is readmissions. In here, we are going to insert a pivot chart. It is in a table that I happen to know is named Encounter. If not, you guys could click the button here and go over to that raw data tab and highlight the table, and it would end up doing the same thing for you, which is calling this range, that table name, Encounter. All right, so now let's build our chart. I want to see for readmission rate that information by the date. I've got a date column in my data that is essentially one item per month, and so the date is a nice clean version that I have of that, so that you can quickly have the date column that you need in order to do this. All right, so I know that's the case, and that also means that I need to get rid of some of the automatic decisions that Excel tried to make for me, which was to put on the year and the month. So now I've got this doing what I need it to do, but it's in a bar chart. That's the default that it wanted to do. That's not what I'm trying to accomplish. I like that area. It was really nice and clean. And so that option is up here in Design, Chart Type, and then you can come down here to the Area section. So I'll go ahead and choose Area, and it will change my graph. Now you also notice probably a lot of things like that graph was it was very clean. It did not have any of these buttons. The way that you remove those is a right click and then hide all field buttons on the chart. Also, it did not actually have any axes, so we can delete those. It also did not have any of these reference lines that are behind the visualization area. So I click on those and hit delete. I'm going to get rid of my legend. I'll go ahead and include the title up top here so that we don't have to remake one like I did for admissions. Readmission rate. All right, now let's get the same formatting that I had chosen on the other one. First of all, I've got the fill for the area chart to be this nice light blue. Right there, and the background of the chart was the dark blue that is over here. So that's working primarily how we want it. The title I would like to get to be white, just like the other. It is 14, and this Apatos narrow, so we're going to have to go make sure that our other title is done in the same way. So now we've got a basic chart sitting here, a pivot chart, and you'll see why that becomes necessary later. But I will copy that, and we can head on over to our dashboard, and I will click this cell and hit paste. and it will paste it into the upper left-hand corner of that cell. However, it will be bigger than what I need, so I'll drag it over and get that sized just like I had wanted. All right, so now we've got readmission rate. Let's go ahead and get this title out of here, because it's not working quite like I would like. It's not looking like the other. So I'm going to do this and choose chart title, get in there and get it working how I had wanted. We are going to name this one admissions. We're going to make it white. All right, now we got the same size and look as the other. And so admissions is looking good. Readmission rate, we are going to need a summary piece of information, like I have the total admissions there. And so we'll go over to our summary information tab. This may look like just a couple of cells, but it actually happens to be a pivot table, which you can tell by this. I'm going to go ahead and design that different, just so that it's a little more apparent that it's a pivot table and we don't overlook that fact later and make a mistake. All right, down below that, I'll give it a little bit of space. I'm going to insert a pivot table from a table range, and that will be that encounter table again. What I think I'm going to actually do is go ahead and just take the overall average readmission rate. And so that requires me to come down to this field, go to value field settings, and choose not count like I accidentally did there, but average, which is right below it. All right, now we have the average readmission, average of the readmission rate, and we can insert that. So this is cell A10 in this column, and I'll show you how we get that over to the dashboard. I'm going to take this shape. Well, typically I would copy and paste it, but I'll do it manually so you can see the process. I will say insert a shape, and I'll grab any sort of rectangular shape and put it generally where I want it. Then I will click on the shape, and in the formulas bar, I'm going to say equals to, and then I'm going to come over here to the summary information tab and choose the item I'm looking for, which is just cell A9. You can see that it made an automatic choice to use the get pivot data function. I don't actually want that, so I'm just going to go ahead and use summary information A9 as the reference. When I hit enter, you are going to see that this gives, oh, I'm sorry, I needed row 10. This gives that average that we were looking for. And let's look at the size of this. It is 24. So let's bring that up to size 24 to match what's next to it. Make it white, get it in the right range, and then obviously this looks really different than the other. What we need to still do is format out the fill and the outline. So we'll say that the shape fill should be no fill, and the shape outline should be no outline. So we have the readmission rate. We've got that average readmission rate overall and some sense of trend in the data, looking identical to our other one, except it's on another measure and it's labeled as such. So that's looking pretty good. I think we're ready to move on to average length of stay, and you can get some repetition seeing how to do this again. I'm actually going to get rid of this cost component because we have an opportunity to outline that here below. And so I'm going to unmerge these cells and pick a new broader range for these 3 summary topics that I will keep at the top. Right now it is 5 rows wide, and I'm going to go ahead and increase that to 6. And I will merge those cells and make this where I'm going to put my ALOS. So you'll see a little bit of my planning process in the meantime. I will pull these down because we can replace them in a minute once I've got this ready to go. Another best practice that you can get used to is to group items. So I do always want these 2 pieces, the chart and that summary shape, to come together. So I'll select both of them I was holding down Control and I clicked on both of them. And then I can go to group and choose group, so that now when I move it, they should come together, and they didn't, which is not what's supposed to happen. I did not select everything properly. Okay, group, ungroup. choose to group them. Okay. There we go. Now it's got what I'm looking for. We will ungroup this. And so we're looking for something that looks a little more like this. By 6. And by 6. All right, so you can see I'm kind of a slow, methodical thinker. I have now sort of the difference that I need to make up, which is 3 spaces. So it looks like I can evenly space these out if I make them all 7 wide. And so I'm going to kind of redo what I had done here. Make sure I bring this back down to that item. And together with the chart, I will group them so that they stay together. All right, so 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 will be our first area. Ungroup this, 1 space, 3, 4, 5, 7. All right, I'm going to ungroup this last one and we will be ready to go. Those are our 3 summary pieces of information, the first being admissions. And now we get to make this a little bit bigger. Second being the readmission rate. Let's fit that to the box. And finally, we're going to go do the average length of stay. So let's create a new worksheet, bring it to the end, and I am going to give it ALOS as the name. We are going to insert a pivot chart. Sorry, my brain's shortcutting to pivot table. I'm going to come across the ribbon here to actually the pivot chart. I need to say where it's coming from. That data is coming from the encounter table. And we are going to do ALOS, which is here in the average length of stay measure. I want to do that over time just like I did the others, so I'll choose date. I'm going to do Control Z to get rid of that automatic action and just have it actually be the date. Let's get rid of these buttons. Let's go ahead and delete our axis, delete our axis, delete our legend. Let's change the chart type to area. All right, we're going to get rid of the background there. Let's get this to the color we are looking for, which is this nice light blue. Change the background of the overall space to that dark blue. Let's get our title with what we need. Average length of stay. We want that to be white. And now we've got a graph to bring over to our dashboard. So let's come on over to dashboard. We've got the average length of stay there. And let's go ahead and get it to the right size. Okay, now I mentioned before what I would do typically for the shape is just to copy and paste it. And so I'm going to select that and do a copy paste. Bring that over, and you're going to see the formula in there is going to be equal to A10. Well, let's go over to our summary information tab and get what we actually need for this, which is the overall average length of stay. And we're going to put that a little bit lower in 14 and 15 here. So I'm going to insert a pivot table from the encounter table information, and I'm going to do average length of stay, and I don't want the sum of that, I actually need the average of that. So here we go, we've got the average length of stay. I'm going to get this formatted so that it will represent like I need it to. Typically on length of stay, I tend to format it to be a number with just 1 decimal place. That seems to be the cleanest and best way for me to use it. So now this is in A15, so I'm going to come over and change the equation of this shape to equals A15 on that sheet. Now it did change the formatting there, so let me go ahead and make that white and size 24. Come on. There we go. All right, we got a high-level summary piece of information. We've got some sense of trend across our top measures in the data set. So we've got admissions, the readmission rate, and the average length of stay. And so next we're going to add a little bit more detail down below so we get some sense of trend with some axes and also some extra context. So we'll do a combination chart that's going to put together our discharges and our readmission rate. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new worksheet in order to do this, bring it to the end, and I'm going to call this discharge. I'll just do DISCH with readmit. Okay, so that's pretty descriptive. I know what's here. I need to insert a pivot chart. I am going to use that encounter table data. And so let's get to the discharges. I take that back. It's going to be admissions. We don't have discharges in here. We've just got the date and the number of admissions, and so that is what's going to go into our data. We're going to want to look at that over time without a doubt because we want to see how that's changing. But I also want another element, and so let's go ahead and say for design, change chart type to be a combo chart. And so we've got this here, and to create a combination chart, we got to have at least one more series. So I'll go ahead and check the series ahead of time, which is our readmission rate. And now we can change that chart type over to a combo. You can see that the default choices it made was to make the sum of admissions the clustered column and to make the sum of readmission rate the line. So we have a couple of issues there. Number one, it needs to be a secondary axis in order for it to represent like we would want it. But also number two, we don't want the sum of that readmission rate. We actually want the average. Because of how my data is set up, I don't actually think it will create a difference, but that is what we would want on that piece there. So now we have number of admissions in the bar chart and the readmission rate here. And it actually helps to point out that there's a pretty clear trend here between the number of patients that we see and our readmission rate. Now it's fake data, so it's probably more obvious than it really would be in real life, but that's the type of thing you're looking for and why you would use a combination chart. So I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm going to take a look at that legend and put it in a different location. I feel we can put it to the bottom and have a little more real estate left to right, and that is the case. I don't like this values item, so I'm going to hide this legend field button on the chart. I don't want to hide all of them, but just that one. These buttons would allow the user to change the date, and I don't need that either actually because we are going to be using a different utility to do that. So I was wrong. Actually, we will go ahead and get the buttons off of this chart. Now we've got mainly what we need. I do think there's some value in having some data labels. So let's add those in. Oh, that's awfully messy. So I don't think that's going to be quite the right choice for us. There are some options here in the data label to see how often we present it. So we've got things like reset that text, format the code. I gotta be honest, I don't know exactly how to create less crowded data labels in Excel outside of the manual choice to delete items. So that may be a lookup item for me. I'll call it my homework, and you could do the same if you're needing to get cleaner looking visuals. There's probably a video out there that shows you, and it'll teach you that that's an important thing to learn as someone who's new to a tool and trying to apply it. There are lots of resources online that you can tap into in order to get the answers that you need. So it's good to flex that muscle a little bit and go out and practice that, because I don't know it off the top of my head, and just being honest with you. So we will get this reformatted and in the right place. What is clear to me now is I actually don't have a good label over this chart to know what it's sharing. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this chart element of a chart label, chart title, sorry. And let's get this name like we would want to. This is going to be admissions with readmission rate by month. Okay, now we've got a title that is descriptive. However, the formatting doesn't match what we have shown in the rest of our data so far. So we need to work on that. We want to go ahead and get rid of some of the distracting information visually, like these lines in the background. They're not adding a whole lot of value in being able to reference the information. So I'm going to get rid of those. I'm going to color this background to be similar to what we have in the other sections. I actually quite like how the orange pops on this blue, but these columns clearly need to be a different color, like this light blue we had in the others. That looks a whole lot better. However, now you can see that our axes are really not working. So let's take a look at what might look better, like possibly white. I think that's going to do the trick. White really stands out, goes with the coloring, and now we can see our axes and be able to tell what's going on in this data. All right, so you've got high-level summary information. We've got an admission with the readmission rate by month down below that. So there's some more detail accessible. So we're going to fill out 2 last items, and then we're going to work on some of the interactivity. And so the last 2 items I'm going to do is a overtime view of length of stay, just to give a little more detailed information about what is going on here. And then we're actually going to do like a table of cost in order to show some summary information by the departments that we have in our data set. So let's start with average length of stay. Now we do have a tab already called average length of stay, so we want to make sure that we call this something a little bit different, like ALOS over time. And we are going to insert a pivot chart again. We're going to use that encounter table. We want to see this over time. That is true. I'm actually going to put time as the, no, I think this works how it is. Then let's go ahead and get that average length of stay in there. Default choice it's making is a bar chart. Now this is getting repetitive. We've got multiple of the same type of chart, left to right, area, or bars. So let's do something different with this one. In this ALOS over time, I'm going to go to design and change chart type and just change our orientation. Let's change it over to bar. I like that. It's also going into a slot that's a little bit taller, so it'll look something like this. Let's get rid of the legend, get rid of those kind of noisy background items. I would like to get rid of these, hide those buttons on the chart. Now we've got a whole lot more real estate. That's looking good. Let's go ahead and call this ALOS. Average length of stay. All right, one other element I think would be really helpful here is some data labels. Let's see how those look. You know, those are worthwhile. You know, I can see them. They give a little more specificity. We do see for sure that there's a trend in lower length of stay recently, which is generally positive in a hospital. But you may want some figures in your mind, like, okay, we used to have a length of stay somewhere near 13 days, and it is trending down towards closer to 12 days. So now that we have those labels, I don't really see a reason to keep this axis. So let's do some of the formatting work. Let's take this background and make it that nice dark blue. Let's get this formatted to be the light blue to really pop. I will go ahead and make my legend and my data labels white. We'll also need to do the same with the title. All right, now we've got a new piece of information that we can take over to our dashboard tab, drop in right here, get it sized just right. Okay, you've got a new piece of detail. And last but not least, let's go get some cost information. We are going to insert actually a pivot table this time. We're going to do it from that encounter table range. And what I want to do is a sum of cost. I want to know total cost by department here. Now, I'm also going to break this out by the year. I think that will be an important visual. I want this formatted to be a currency. It's not readable right now. It's also a very big number. So I'm going to come here to the number format, currency, $sign with no cents behind it, because that won't be necessary. I believe there might be a design that will fit already to our theme. Yeah, this one looks quite good. Maybe that one there, or even, yeah, there we go. We've got that dark and light blue that should come in handy. Okay, so let's copy this over and take it to our dashboard area. Let's get it inserted into what we were looking at. Now, right now there is a grand total both on the columns, which makes sense, but also on the rows, which definitely doesn't make sense. I don't want to know cardiology's total billed amount for the last 3 years. And so I'm going to go to Design and Grand Totals and On for Columns Only. So that's going to make sense. That's what I would like to represent. I think it looks better when it's centered, the values there, so I'll get that in place. And now we've got generally working information. We've got high-level summaries on top. We have some more detail about a couple of variables interacting. I'm just noticing that this legend needs white for its writing as well. We've got some detailed cost information that also becomes available. So there we go. We have the basic accomplishment of having a dashboard set up that is giving a broad swath of information about our practice. And so that was the first thing that we were trying to get done, if you remember, just in dashboard layout and setup. And so now let's talk about connecting slicers and timelines. I'm just going to pick one of the charts, and I am going to do insert the slicer, the timeline, because I do already have the slicer there. That's giving me an error I didn't expect. Insert timeline. No. Data model, no data models. What about this one if I say insert timeline? Okay. All right, I'm going to get a timeline inserted based on one of these items, and so I can take this pivot table and say insert timeline. It's going to tell me the date columns that it sees. I can use that date item. I'll bring it over here by our department choice that we already have, and I'm going to change this slicer to be a little more limited in its options. I actually don't want this to be months. I'd like it to be years, so they can pick 22, 23, 24, or any combination of those. The last two things is to get these formatted to be looking a lot like what we have in the rest of our dashboard, which is a little bit darker, also maybe with some fill. Let's go over to this, and we will want to pick in this slicer area. Let's see what we have for options. No really dark ones. Let's do a new style. No, forget that. Okay, let's get our timeline also to be formatted generally to look like the rest of ours, which is a little bit darker. And so now we've got two slicers that are going to stick out because they have this white background, but they have those nice dark blue colors like the rest of our dashboard, so they look quite good together. The thing that we need to do is get these to actually apply to the items on our dashboard, and multiple of them. And so that is buried in the slicer settings, where you can choose, the next item that we need The next item we need to do is to get the slicer and the timeline connected to these multiple items in our dashboard. So I'm going to pick this slicer first, right click on it, and go to Report Connections. It's opening up a window that shows me the different reports that are available, all connected to that same data source. And it's all of the tables and pivots that we've used to create the visuals here on the dashboard. So I'm going to choose all of them and click OK. We'll want to do something similar with the timeline. Report Connections, open that up and get it applied to everything. And you're going to see the impact of choosing this. What's going to happen when we make a choice on either the slicer or the timeline is our entire dashboard will react. So when I choose cardiology, everything in the dashboard has adjusted. I'm seeing admissions only for cardiology, which is 86.95. Just their average readmission rate, their average length of stay and direction. You can see they have a far smaller length of stay compared to the other groups. They also have a different pattern here in their readmission rate, and the total cost table also has changed. You could also use the timeline to just look at a smaller slice of time, zoom in just on a recent period, let's say. You could even do a recent period of all locations, a recent period of the emergency room and pediatrics. You can see that our timeline and slicer are impacting all of the visuals in our range. So you have a working dashboard. The only thing that I would be remiss, I would be upset if I did not show you, was how to just give it a background so it looks even nicer. So we've got these grids behind it, which are not my preference. So I'll go to View and get rid of those grid lines. Certainly could keep it white. I also think it might look nice to have something like a darker background behind it. Only change that might be needed is that these should now be a white color. So, all right, now you've got a working dashboard, clean and good looking, that responds to your actions. So if you really want to wow your bosses the next time you get asked to bring back some summary information, bring back a summary information with all of this great detail. All right, thanks so much for coming to this last video. Next, we're going to wrap this thing up and look at just some summary tips and tricks for everybody. I'm so glad you guys have joined me and stayed with me for this whole journey.